button. All right, well, we are live. Thanks everyone for joining. Welcome to another edition of the OpenJS Foundation's Cross-Project Council meeting. Today is the 14th of April, and we can get this party started. Do we have any announcements or anything to discuss before we get into the agenda?
Just a couple of things. So we have our next Collab Summit planning meeting is next Tuesday, as is the next Standards Working Group meeting. We also want to encourage all of the projects to get us being the foundation staff, specifically marketing, and that is Rachel with an assist from myself, involved early. If you are doing a project release or some other kind of update or news that you're sharing with your project community, we want to be able to help you amplify that. And so if there is any way you can let us know, maybe as part of your maybe you've got a checklist for new releases or new launches or announcements, add us to that, because we want to help you get the most mileage out of those. So that I'm just thinking specifically there, because jQuery had a new release this week. That's pretty cool. Congrats, yeah. jQuery. But we want to make sure that we're able to help lift that for everybody. My mind is drawing a blank on the other things that I was going to maybe share. No, that's it. That's all I have right now. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. If they come to you later, we can interrupt our regularly scheduled program.
Just the last thing is that we do hope to announce our speakers for OpenJS World next week. So be on the lookout for speaker announcements for the conference. That's the other thing.
Great. Great. Excellent. And again, I'll remind folks to add themselves to the meeting notes. There's the link one more time. jQuery in the chat, which brings back fond memories. And also, if anybody can help take notes, that is always helpful. And somebody can help me keep an eye on attendees so I can let in our executive director. That's always helpful too. Thank you. Cool. So getting into the agenda then. The first item on our list is issue 513. This is an issue that I opened, which is kind of silly because it should just be a pull request. But I thought I'd open it up for comments before I started working on updating the documentation. But this is updates to requirements of potential new regular members. I was hoping to convert this into a pull request before this meeting, but I ran out of time. So feel free to drop in any comments here if you want, but I will try to open up a PR today or sometime in the very near future. And we can move forward on this. These will be updates to the charter, the governance, and the README. So it'll take a little bit of time to get it fully over the finish line, but I'll get it opened up ASAP so we can move things along. Does anybody have any comments or questions or thoughts about this? No? All right, cool. Let's see. So next up is voting members chosen by regular members. I was thinking about this earlier today. This is, according to our CPC charter, up to 2 voting members may be nominated by the regular members. Once nominated, these members must be ratified by the CPC voting members, and then they can be voting members as well. Since we may have some new regular members joining soon, I'm hoping that the folks that were a part of the election recently will join as regular members. I propose that we open up nominations now and have them open for a week and then start voting next week. Does that seem reasonable, or is that rushed? Any thoughts?
Seems reasonable to me.
All right.
I'm sorry, Joe, this is going to sound really silly, but can you explain the difference between the different parts of these different members? Because I'm super confused about the different roles.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So there are voting members and there are regular members, and in the day-to-day work, there is not much distinction, but there are a few instances where voting members need to vote or approve or what have you. They're not that often, but they have come up a few times where we had, I think, maybe changes to governance require majority of voting members to approve. And then I think I think if there was anything that actually required a vote, which we expect to be rare, would require voting members. So as outlined in our governance, perhaps the impact projects each gets to nominate up to 2 members as voting members, and then 2 voting members are chosen from the at-large growth and incubating projects, which we just concluded that election. But also, according to our charter, the regular members, folks who have stepped up as regular members, can also nominate and elect 2 voting members. So, there's not really like that much difference in the day-to-day work, but it is how we've structured things. Does that make sense, Toby?
It does. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, sure. I feel like in some ways we've perhaps over-architected some of our work here in the CPC, but that's where we're at. Oh, it looks, did I yeah, okay, so I made a comment last week. But if there are no objections, then maybe we'll take that timeline. Does that seem reasonable?
Yes, it seems reasonable to me.
Okay, great. I'm just typing in a quick comment here. Nominations for voting members from regular members is open and will conclude in 1 week. Great. So get your nominations in. I don't think there's much around the process for this. So do we want to, I guess you can either nominate in this issue or create a separate issue. It might make sense to just do it in this issue, and we'll go from there. And with it being open for a week, then folks who want to become regular members first can do so, and then also join the election for this process as well. Cool. Anything else?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, this is me again, but how do we know who the regular members are?
They are in the README.
Okay, wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, and the process to become a regular member, which I think, were you already a regular member, Toby? I don't remember. Looking right now, is to just PR yourself in as a regular member. Let me get a link here. No, you're not yet, but you'll be a voting member. So let me drop this into the chat here. So that's a link to the regular member section of the README, and anyone can PR themselves into the README to become a regular member. The expectation is that they have been active within one of the projects, but I have that issue open that I'll convert to a pull request that gives more guidance on what we expect from regular members to try and encourage folks to be involved and not just put their name down. Does that all make sense? Anybody have any questions, any thoughts? Cool. All right. Moving on then. The next issue is 503. This is how do we keep code of conduct up to date without upstreaming our modifications to it? I feel like we talked about this last week, but I don't know where exactly we've landed. And I was wondering even about leaving this one to the end and trying to just get through the rest of the agenda and then come back to this and kind of work on this and get some action items or a path forward.
I would like to propose that we save this issue for the end because of the nature of this issue.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was suggesting as well. I think that's wise. Any objections to that? Cool. We'll come back to that. I don't think we'll have to spend a lot of time on the issues here from what I've seen earlier. So next on the agenda is add code of conduct and moderation information to openjsf.org. I know Brian did some work on this. The last comment 14 days ago, code of conduct.openjsf.org, links to the COC and the CPC repo. It's referenced under /collaboration on the website. And there's now a code of conduct menu item under about. Does this satisfy this for the time being as we work through exactly how we're managing our code of conduct?
I think so.
And Miles, you open this. Are you still on the call? I think you said BRB. Oh, you said back. Okay. What do you think, Miles?
Yeah.
Any objection to this?
Sorry, I was only half back. Shelly needs to be promoted as a first thing there.
Just got her. Yeah.
And then,
Welcome, Shelly.
Can you remind me what issue we're talking about? Sorry.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. This is issue 502. This is add code of conduct and moderation information to openjsf.org. Brian has done some work on that, and I'm wondering if this satisfies this particular issue. And I can paste it into the chat as well.
So I guess the one thing I would say is right now, code of conduct is buried under about. I think it should be in the main title bar. I don't think it should be buried. So it should be one of the tabs at the top there. If other people disagree, I'm not going to push on it too hard, but I think it should be a top level menu.
I agree.
I agree too.
1 second.
Yeah, this is
Brian's going to just do it live.
this way I don't forget.
Yeah,
just 1 second, we can see how it looks.
Sure. I agree too. I think having it right up front is encouraging for folks and
Yay.
Yeah.
Good.
Bingo. Great.
How do we feel about the order of items up there in the top menu bar? Is it in the right place?
I think we could put it at the end after blog, but now we're getting super nitpicky.
I would agree with Miles.
Specifically asking for nitpicky.
Yeah. Just from other sites, generally, it's kind of like that last item. That I don't know, from a Z reading perspective.
Okay.
I like it there.
Cool. All right, looks good. Great. I will close this issue.
Thanks, and I really appreciate Brian making that URL a forwarding link as well. That makes sharing it a lot easier. I really like that approach.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah, I agree.
Virtually zero effort to do that. So if there are any other parts of our governance where it would be helpful to have a short forwarding URL like that, just let me know.
Yeah,
Great.
I wasn't even thinking about that as part of the solution. So very happy that it's there.
Good.
Yep, agreed. I posted the link into the chat too if folks are curious what we're talking about. Cool. That's progress, actions. Thank you. Great. Next item on the list is self-managed maintainer directory plus groups.io mailing lists on atlist.openjsf.org. Brian, do you want to let us know where we're at here and what might be left?
Yeah. I mean, basically, I can turn this. It's already basically turned on. I've left this open because I think Emily had some questions about the proper way to do this, whether we should have the repo which configures the mailing lists, whether this repo ought to be public or not. I haven't really done a whole lot of changes to this because I think I'm waiting for that to be resolved. It'd be helpful to know. But other than that, I mean, it's ready to go. It's just a more philosophical question of, do we want to have a public repo with the emails available, or a private repo?
It's a good question. I think my email is on my GitHub, but I can imagine other folks not feeling the same way.
Yeah, I would be surprised if any of our emails aren't already public, but that said, I don't think we should force all future people to have their emails be public.
Yeah.
I mean, it works fine either way, so I will just let you folks decide and let me know, and we'll take it from there. And then it's just a matter of plugging everything in.
Tierney, did you have a comment? Or Toby, I see you unmute and then mute.
I just think private is better for the reasons that, private emails.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that like in Node, literally everyone's email is in every README they participate in. So that's been the standard there, is relatively public, whether it's your real personal email or just a throwaway one. That has been the standard in Node, and I'm unopinionated. Just wanted to share that. And we also have our email open, like our repo that just saying.
I guess the one thing that I would say would maybe be different there, although we could take it with a grain of salt, would be Node is one project, and if their default, like Node has historically had a default to public for kind of everything, but I don't think that default to public, for example, is like a base guideline or like one of the guiding missions of OpenJS. Like transparency definitely is, but like that level of transparency, not necessarily. We have 31 different projects, and I would not want the publication of email, for example, to be something that stops people from participating. So I think a default to private for this kind of thing seems reasonable to me.
That's totally fine with me. Yeah. Yeah, and just for what it's worth, that wasn't like me suggesting we do that. I was more just trying to share what Node has historically done.
Yeah, and I would add, I guess, on the other side, I am perfectly fine with the default to public. That is how I've worked over in Node, but I'm understanding and respecting of others who maybe don't feel that way, and see why in such a larger setting we may want to default to private.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly add that for folks that are in large corporations, having to work using their corporate address might be a requirement. So yeah, there's lots of complications here that are easily addressed by making things more private.
Yeah. All right, I think we have some consensus there, Brian, unless anyone objects to defaulting to private for this particular thing.
So would that just be making the whole directory repo private?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and so there are a couple of implications of that, I think. So if we make it private, I think we'd want to be very diligent about anybody who's listed in the repo should also be a member of the organization so that they can access and update their information. And perhaps we have, I'm trying to remember what teams we have in the organization, but we might have a team specifically for maintainers of projects. If we don't, we might want a team like that.
And if we have a team like that, we may want to work on a way to like streamline or automate the process of people joining it. Probably not like so streamlined that anyone can click a button and then be a member. Probably needs some degree of vetting, but we should simplify the process of people joining that team.
Yeah, there's the organization here that Jory created called Project Leads. I assume that is, or sorry, the team that Jory created called Project Leads.
And that's the list of, it may be a little bit out of date, but that's the list of maintainer contacts that we brought over during onboarding. So it's probably about 6 months out of date, I would imagine.
That sounds perfect. That sounds like that would be the one we'd want to use. So thank you for doing that, Jory.
It sounds like we're trending towards making these private. Is that?
Mm-hmm. Yep, private, and then at the same time making sure that anybody who's listed in this is able to update their contact information. So granting access to this particular team, which Jory had created, which contains the project leads or the project leads as they were 6 months ago, which grant access to that team to this repo. And yeah, that should work out really well. This is helpful. Thank you.
The follow-on question I have is, I mean, I understand the concern about emails. Is there concern over just showing who's in the mailing lists as well? Like I'm wondering if these repos could be private, but how somehow we could automate a public version as well. I don't know if that was already talked about.
Does that actually solve something? Like what is, what's the utility of that?
The idea was originally to make this more discoverable. So for example, if we were to say we have a team that's CPC private members or say a code of conduct panel or a code of conduct reporting alias for a project, that there's an up-to-date list of who these people are, and that it's kept in sync with the mailing list at groups.io. Now, one thought could be, if we keep this private, we could also create an action that opens a PR against each project's main repo to push the directory file for that project up to that repo. So you make a change in here, say it's for Express, you update the Express maintainers, it then opens up PR to push that particular file into the Express repo. So they now can just pull in this file that's been created, this maintainer's file. It's a thought.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just coming from the transparency perspective of, you know, if you have a mailing list that's used to communicate with a group, visibility of who's a member of the group is, at least in my mind, not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, and I think that's fundamentally the challenge here. Is it's very difficult to manage a mailing list without the emails of the people who are on that list, and the fact that all this is being kept in the same directory in the same repo is going to be a challenge because you can't make it selectively public or private.
Right, and that's where I was just coming from. That like if it's strictly the emails, you could make the rest of the info, like you said, through some other action or whatever that would push the information somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'd be happy to work on that with you, Brian, if that's something you'd be interested in.
I would welcome that. Absolutely.
Cool.
I guess so. For everybody else, is it just the emails that are of concern, or is there any concern about having the list of people who are in these mailing lists?
I mean, at least for me, I need more context on like the full spectrum of who is going to be in them and like what the mailing lists are actually going to be. Does every project have its own mailing list? Like how broad is it, I guess, is more of the question I would have, because then like if we're opting in hundreds of people, like I mean, Node has 600 people in the org. You know, if we're opting in hundreds or potentially thousands of people into this, probably keeping things on the private side would be better, you know, to echo the similar concern from before.
Yeah, let me maybe give a quick overview here of how this solves solves potentially an issue here. Ultimately, what this is meant to do, it's meant to do two things. One is to enable projects to maintain a list essentially of who are the key technical representatives from that project. We've been calling them maintainers, could be anything else, whatever term is used for the people who make the decisions. And with 30 some projects, it's somewhat burdensome for me and Jory to go around and kind of constantly keep these lists up to date. So the thought was, if we were able to set projects up so that they could maintain their own information and then get a mailing list and a directory out of it, that it would make it easier to keep everybody, up to date. If the CPC needs to reach out to the maintainers of a certain project, or if we need to reach out to all projects as a whole, for example, if there's a vote or something like that, or a preference poll, the idea was that we would then have these lists available so that we'd be able to reach out to them. And there are really, there's no limit to what can be managed through this. I just have to pre-configure a list on the groups.io list server. It could be the maintainers. It could be code of conduct. Things where you want to have transparency over who's receiving the reports. It could be outreach committees of various types. It could be event organizing. Could be anything like that where it makes sense to have visibility into who's on what list and how to reach them. Does that make sense?
And I guess I'd add, like, if you're ever in a position where you've mailed to one of these emailing lists and nobody responds, it's nice to be able to look at the like, you get no response. It's nice to be able to look at the list and say, oh, Michael's on that list. I know him. I'm going to go, poke him and say, what the heck? Whereas if it's just a list that you have no idea who's on it, it's not as sort of transparent. It's more like a black hole, right? Exactly.
And one of the other thoughts as well is that if you have a list that has people who aren't involved anymore, then it would be helpful to be able to remove people and prune lists as well over time, so that it's not dependent upon one person, like, for example, me, to go in and take a look at things and change things on behalf of other people. So that amount of self-governance on behalf of everybody, including the CPC, on behalf of the projects, that's what we're going for here. And also, it's auditable if it's in a Git history, Git log.
Cool. So do we have a path forward then?
It sounds like maybe the path forward here is, let's maybe just make this private for now. And then Tierney and I can figure out if there's a reasonable way to push certain files selectively out of this repo into project repos, so that we get kind of the best of both worlds. You get a directory that stays up to date, but people's personal information, the configuration files, remains private.
Yeah, or even, like, I think a repo, like the projects, are a great idea. If that doesn't work out for some reason, though, even like another mirror repo, which just has the stuff we are comfortable being public. Here's the list of mailing lists, here's the list of people on them, and maybe that's it.
And we could easily set up GitHub Actions in the private repo to just automate pushing the information we want public out to all the individual repos, and then it's like no one has to maintain it on top of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, great. Brian, would you mind maybe just dropping a comment in the issue, just what the next steps are, and move on from there?
I'm on it. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. And thanks, Tierney, for stepping up as well. Beautiful. All right, next item on the list here is amendments to the bylaws to ensure a sign-off between voting CPC members. Thanks, Christian, for opening this. We had a little bit of commentary here. I know Christian updated it. I think this is just waiting for board approval, right?
My only question was I didn't count. Has anybody counted and checked that we have half the voting members? Is 8 half?
Tierney and I counted, and 8 is the number. I think we had 15 voting members as of an hour ago. Now we have less, but I think we have enough to move forward on this.
Okay, so
for what it's worth, I think some of the less are now were counted in that. There was I stopped counting at 8, so there might have been more. There was consensus, so I stopped.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay, so I'll take the action to send an email to ask for the board vote to start.
Great. Excellent. Just drop a note in there. Cool. And moving on. The next item is the nominations for voting CPC members. As mentioned earlier, Chris Hiller and Toby Langle are the new voting members elected from the growth and at-large and incubating projects. So congratulations to them. I've already sent out a tweet, and I have, I guess I should link this PR. I have a PR open for the updating the README with these updates.
Yeah, it looks like we sent PRs over top of each other, Joe.
Oh, did we?
You were all excited.
Yeah, I had mine all ready to go. So we can close mine or what have you. Mine has updates.
They actually have different stuff in them. So
okay, well let's.
Yours updated more of the voting stuff. Mine, I might not to have your effort be wasted, Toby, but I might close mine in favor of Joe's and then just send mine for adding me to regular members.
Yes, great. And I think Joe's actually fixes the line that I just removed, and he includes.
So I'll go ahead and close it.
It's better. Yes.
All right. Thanks.
Okay. Cool. Well, great. I'm glad that you know you've got that other PR all ready to go too. So excellent. Cool. And mine is 519. I'll drop it in this other issue. And I don't know. Should we? Is this? We can probably close this now, huh? Great, I'll do that. Closing comment. Excellent. So moving on, the next item is the OpenJS Collaboration Network. Michael, is there any thing to?
I'm going to say sorry again, no progress or updates this week. Still high on my list.
If you want to find some time too, I'd be happy to you know, work on it with you some.
Okay, helpful. Sounds good.
Cool. Next on the agenda is pull request 414. Brian, Toby, we're working on this. This is Ad Foundation-wide copyright guidance.
Yes, I actually made some progress today, which I haven't pushed yet, but I did work on it this week.
Awesome, great. All right, cool. Well, we will we'll check back in on that one next week. Thank you, Toby. Cool. I'll go to you again, Toby. Oh, actually, post-graduation checklist, is this with the board too? I'm waiting for it to open.
This is with
the board. It should be with the board.
Yes, it is. We're just waiting on the last, I think we needed one more board vote, which I think may have happened, but
I think we got it. Yeah,
I think so, right?
Check really quick.
We're waiting for somebody to check, is that right?
Yeah, I'm just checking right now.
Yep, cool. Do it live.
Good to go.
Great.
Okay, Brian, I'm gonna take that in, Brian. Good to got last vote. So I'll go ahead and land it.
Great, thank you, Michael. While I have your attention, Michael, is there anything on the responsible security disclosures?
No, as I mentioned last week, I had discussed with Marcin, and he's got some next steps, which we should see in, but I think he said it was going to be a week or two. So.
Okay. Cool. And anything else around this? I feel like we talked a little bit about AMP or something, but I'm not sure if there was anything out of that we were waiting on or anything.
Yeah, so a quick update on the AMP side. The person that would be the person that is responsible for the security aspects of this is dealing with issues around COVID-19 confinement. And so it doesn't have the bandwidth or the ability to actually be responsive right now around this.
Okay. So, I mean, I think we're waiting on this. It'll be a sort of a concrete minimum bar as the next step. So hopefully by the time we get that, they may be freed up but we'll see.
That would be nice, right?
Yeah. Great. Well, good luck to them. I hope it works out. Crazy times. So the next item on the agenda is issue 469. This is Populate the Code of Conduct panel. Last week I was trying to update the description here to outline what it is that who we're expecting to be on this panel. The three people that we have definitively is Robin, Nina, and Jordan. I'd like to move forward on this. I'm wondering how do we, I'm thinking particularly about the board and the CPC. Those seem like things that we can, have action on. Like I mentioned last week, I would be happy to be on the panel, but I don't know if we should open it up to some sort of, nomination and work through it. What are people's thoughts about getting progress on this?
So we have an additional list of people that we also did direct outreach to from beyond our immediate community because of this issue of ensuring that we have a diverse group of people to represent the, people on the panel, right? So some of those folks are from Sneak, from Samsung, and stuff like that. So that we have a list of names. I would assume that in the same way we are hoping to keep track of lists of people using the directory tool, which is a super neat way of managing this stuff. I think it would be great if we did something similar there. So that if anybody who is interested in like who's on any particular group can kind of go and see that there. I'd love that. It'd be great.
So I think, like, based on the current governance, if we want to include more than one person who's outside of the project, of the foundation, we would need to, some PRs to change that governance. So that may be an action that, you want to take a look at.
So does that fall into, are you thinking the optionally one invited outside expert as agreed by other COCP members?
That's currently, in what we have in the governance, it's an escalation board, and it's got, people who are the executive director, or a member of the board, CPC member, marketing committee, the top level projects, and I guess we have the wording there wrong, but the non-top level projects, and then, one invited outside expert. So, we can change that, but we would need to have, a number of additional outside people. And I guess it also makes me think we almost, like, we don't have a code of conduct working group or anything like that either, right? Because, at least in my mind, this panel will not get together all that often. It's like if there's something that gets escalated, if there's, more active discussions on that front that we want to have, which I could definitely see, a working group in addition would make lots of sense.
Just a question, like how many people are in that list?
Up to 7, it sounds like.
No, I mean the people external that have that Joey was speaking about having done outreach to.
1, 2, 3. Wait, Jordan's on the list. 1, 2, 3. There's 5, 6 additional people, I think.
Yeah, and I think this is Robin. The idea behind this is we're not getting nominations from projects.
Mm-hmm.
So, so if we need to populate a code of conduct committee, do we do so with folks who are interested in doing so, as opposed to waiting for folks to nominate? All of the folks on our list, they are with member companies and projects. but we would just be reaching outside our typical organizational structure, how I would put it.
I guess maybe even put in a more direct and way, I think that we drafted an idea, a governance idea for this before, we kind of laid the tracks, I guess, before we knew exactly where we were going, and that's not taking us anywhere. So I would suggest, my strong recommendation would be for us to rewrite this part in a way that reflects what we can get done, which is populate a panel of outside experts who are happy to do this, but aren't necessarily current members of CPC or project maintainers or what have you. That's the only way we're going to get a diverse group of people to do this.
Right. My only point was we should do that. Like, if we've got if we want to, we need to basically submit the PR to change the governance and get that going.
Yeah, I feel like maybe we should have a working meeting to really get a handle on the direction that we're headed, and then align the governance accordingly. We did have a code of conduct, working group meeting a few weeks ago, a couple months ago. Maybe we should just have another one to kind of align this and really just get this over the finish line and feel like we have it in place.
I definitely support that. I think that would help us, with the issue of carts before horses, so to speak. So +1.
Yeah. Were you going to say something, Toby?
Yeah, I'd like to be involved in that meeting. I understand the decision behind this structure, but I'm slightly uneasy to have such an imbalance from people that are part of the community and people that are not. I find that kind of awkward.
I agree.
I guess it's your definition of community is, maybe my definition is broader, because if I look at the list we brainstormed there, I would say they all are part of the community, just maybe not in the structure of CPC members.
So I haven't seen the list. So,
okay.
And I don't know if the list has been published somewhere, and if, like, I find it great to have external people, and I think what I'm trying to say here is I think I'd like maybe the different the CPC and maybe other groups that are involved with the overall community to be happy and confident that the people that are picked are people that are sort of like familiar with the culture and this broad community, which I'm very sure they are. It's just like, from the data that I have, it's not like I don't know.
Yeah, and I think your comment, like, the balance needs to be right, because this list was originally put together as people who would potentially, like, they're representing the groups that are going to be bound by the decisions of this board.
I think maybe another, sorry to interrupt, Michael, but
yeah.
I think something that would be helpful to just sort of realign on for everyone is what exactly this group is going to be called in to do, right? Because I think there's something that that not everybody shares, which is like, what is the role of this group of people? How frequently are we really going to be relying on them?
Yeah. I would definitely agree with that.
Agreed. Yes.
Like, in my mind, I have hopefully never.
Right.
But there's obviously a role for a group of interested people to get together more than ever and talk about lots of important things. Is it this group? Maybe not, right? But yeah, no, I agree that that's a very good thing to clarify up front if we have different ideas.
Yeah, so I'll say, as the person who interfaces probably the most with projects trying to navigate this for onboarding, my interpretation of the function of this group of people is to step in and or be present and available in 3 specific types of situations. One is that the project's code of conduct group or moderation group, whoever those folks may be, request additional help. 2, in the hopefully exceedingly rare case that somebody wants to appeal such a decision with the foundation directly. And what was the third one? Shit, sorry. Oh, that's live.
Well, I think along maybe the same lines, the last one is if there is an issue with someone who is a part of the moderation team of a particular project.
That's it. That was the third one. If it happened that there was a conflict of interest or significant conflict of interest or issue with individuals on the code of conduct enforcement team itself. So those were the 3 scenarios that were imagined previously.
All right, well, we're coming near the end of our time. You know, I think that it would make sense for us to just sit down and hash this out, you know, in a working group meeting. I would volunteer to be a part of that. I think Toby said as well. I would imagine Jordan and Nina and Robin as well, and anyone else.
I'd certainly participate.
Great.
I'd be up for participating as long as my availability is like I'd have me as an optional participant. Don't block on my schedule, but I'll try to make it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Jory, can maybe you and I follow up and set that up?
Yep.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to say, Robin and Jory, thank you for having done the work. And I hope my comment was not perceived as being dismissive of that or of like the people that you brought on that list.
Well, I think they're all awesome, and I look forward to clarifying this situation as much as possible so that that you know we're all on the same page about it.
Yeah, and diversity is absolutely critical, just different points of view. And I think this is the only way
100%.
we'll get there. Yeah.
Yep, agreed.
Great. So we'll work on that. I think perhaps similarly, we have the issue that we punted until the end, and we have now run out of time. Is the how do we keep the code of conduct up to date? I think this is also a good candidate for a working session to hash this out. I hate to put more meetings on people's calendars, but I would be happy to sit down on this and try to make some progress.
The one thing I would add, Joe, is that if it's going to have a working session, I would very much like it if it was a working session where the output was a proposal to be brought to the CPC, as opposed to a working session where the ending is like kind of assumed to be what will happen.
Sure, that's fair.
And I actually added I added a pull request to the discussion that is also CRC related. That would be good to have as in that same conversation, I guess.
This is a pull request to the CPC repo.
Let me just find the issue number. It was Jory's issue 515.
The issue 515?
Sorry, the pull request 515.
Okay.
Which relates to where should code of conduct sit in the projects, and there was some disagreement there.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I mean this should be sorted, I think, in a meeting as well.
Which, to your earlier point, suggests that a COC working group would be maybe a useful thing to have.
Mm-hmm. You mean just a meeting to kind of hash this out, or do you mean like an ongoing working group?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, I'll stick with just the initial meeting for now.
Yeah.
And
I
we'll
think in that
figure out.
meeting, though, you could add in the, does it make sense to have a standing group?
Mhm.
Like we have a question, we need to come to resolution, which is the group of people who are interested to pull together. Does that make sense? Or is it just do it ad hoc like we have been?
Mhm.
I guess the only question I would have is like, is there a lot of value in distinguishing between the group of people who are responsible for maintaining it versus the people who are kind of codifying it? Because we're already talking about having like a COCP. So to me, that seems like the group who should be actively reviewing policy and making policy suggested changes. I would personally be a little bit concerned if we separated those two and had a group that was not actually actively working on, like with the policy, making suggested policy changes. I've seen that kind of lack of distinction cause conflict in the past.
Mhm.
So we have like the CPC who can kind of vote or agree on overall changes, and anyone can be kind of inspired to make suggested changes here, or we could make subgroups to particularly handle things. But if there's any sort of like regular group that's consistently reevaluating process, I think that should be the people who are actively engaged in enforcing it.
It makes me think of like we have voting CPC members and regular CPC members, right? It's like I think you want to make the group that are discussing the policies as open and as many people as you can get in. When you get to handling escalations, I'm not sure you can be quite so open. And maybe I'm wrong on that front.
But the
That's the only
COCP can have
distinction I see.
regular open. The COCP could have regular open process discussion meetings. I think what I'm advocating against is making a separate group specifically for handling those process discussions.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't disagree. And we are at time, but let's, I wrote down,
Yeah.
I wrote down those two kind of open questions, both Michael's and Miles, and we can, discuss those further in another session. And yeah, like I said, we're at time. Thanks again, Shelley, for joining first time in the meeting. I appreciate seeing you here, and we'll call it a wrap.